The rain arrived exactly when Martha Henley knew it would. She had lived in Cincinnati long enough to recognize the particular heaviness in the October air, that metallic smell that preceded the autumn storms rolling in from the Ohio River. Standing under the green awning of Springer and Sons funeral home, she watched the droplets begin their descent, first tentatively, then with growing conviction, drumming against the pavement of Reading Road. Inside, the chapel was a study in uncomfortable silence. Rows of empty folding chairs stretched before a modest casket adorned with a single spray of white lilies. Martha counted them again, though she already knew the number by heart. 11 people. 11 souls had come to say goodbye to Danny Castellano, a man who had once filled stadiums with his presence. Her husband, Robert, shifted beside her, his arthritic knees protesting the standing. At 73, he moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned not to trust his body completely. "Maybe we should start," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the soft funeral home music playing from hidden speakers. Martha shook her head. "We'll wait a bit longer. Someone else might come." But even as she said it, she felt the weight of the truth. This was it. This was all there would be. Danny's sister Carol sat in the front row, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Beside her, Carol's husband Frank stared straight ahead with the blank expression of someone who had stopped feeling years ago. Behind them, scattered across the vast emptiness of the chapel, were a handful of former neighbors. A nurse from the care facility where Danny had spent his final months, and 2 elderly men Martha recognized from the old neighborhood on Vine Street. Danny Castellano deserved better than this. Once upon a time, he had been Cincinnati's golden boy, the kid from over the Rhine who could hit a curveball like he was born doing it. Martha remembered watching him play at Crosley Field in the summer of 1967, the crack of his bat echoing across the stadium, the roar of 40,000 fans rising like a wave. He had been 23 years old, impossibly beautiful in his crisp white uniform, his dark hair gleaming under the stadium lights. Mrs. Henley, the funeral director, a thin man with sympathetic eyes and a practiced expression of professional sorrow, approached her with quiet footsteps. "Shall we begin the service?" Martha looked once more at the doors, hoping for a miracle she knew wouldn't come. The rain was falling harder now, creating rivers along the gutters of Reading Road. Through the windows, she could see the grey October afternoon settling over the city like a shroud. "Yes," she finally said, "I suppose we should." The service was brief, almost painfully so. The funeral director read from a script that could have applied to anyone. Carol was too overcome to speak. No one else volunteered to share memories. The recorded organ music played its predetermined melodies, filling the silence that should have been occupied by stories and laughter and tears born of genuine connection. Martha thought about standing up, about telling everyone who Danny really was. But what would she say? That he had been kind to her when she was a young teacher struggling with a classroom of difficult students. That he had once stopped his car to help her change a flat tire on a sweltering July day in 1968. That he had always remembered her name, always asked about her children, always had a moment for everyone he met. It didn't seem like enough. Not nearly enough to explain why a man who had once been loved by thousands should die alone and forgotten, mourned by barely a dozen people in a half-empty funeral chapel. Robert's hand found hers, his grip firm despite the tremor that had become constant in recent years. They had been married for 51 years, and he could still read her thoughts. "You can't fix everything, Martha," he murmured. "I know," she replied, but the sadness sat heavy in her chest anyway. The service ended with a prayer. People began to gather their coats and umbrellas, preparing to face the October rain. Carol remained seated, staring at the casket as if willing it to open, to reveal that this had all been some terrible mistake. Martha was helping Robert with his coat when the doors to the chapel opened. At first, she thought it was just another latecomer, perhaps someone who had gotten lost or caught in traffic. But then she saw the way the funeral director's expression changed, saw the sudden straightening of his posture, the widening of his eyes. The man in the doorway was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders slightly stooped by age. His white hair was damp from the rain, combed back from a face that 74 years had weathered but not diminished. He wore a simple black suit, no tie, his white shirt open at the collar. In his hands, he carried a baseball cap, navy blue with a red C on the front, the color faded from years of wear. Martha's breath caught in her throat. She knew that face. Everyone in Cincinnati knew that face. Pete Rose stood in the doorway of the chapel, water dripping from his jacket. His legendary intensity softened, but not erased by the decades. His eyes scanned the nearly empty room, taking in the sparse crowd, the lonely casket, the weight of absence. "I'm not too late, am I?" he asked, his voice gravelly, carrying the unmistakable accent of Cincinnati's West Side. "To say goodbye to Danny?" The funeral director found his voice first. "No, Mr. Rose. We were just finishing up." Pete Rose walked down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing in the quiet chapel. People turned in their seats, eyes widening with recognition. Carol looked up from her grief, confusion and recognition warring on her tear-stained face. Rose stopped at the casket, placing one weathered hand on the polished wood. He stood there for a long moment, his head bowed, his lips moving in what might have been a prayer or simply a private conversation with an old friend. Then he turned to face the small gathering, still holding that faded Cincinnati Reds cap in his hands. His eyes were wet, though whether from rain or tears, Martha couldn't tell. "I know I'm nobody special," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I know a lot of people got opinions about me, about my life, about the mistakes I made. But I'm here because Danny Castellano was my friend when nobody else wanted to be, and I'll be damned if I let him go into the ground without somebody standing up to tell the truth about who he really was." The chapel was absolutely silent. Even the recorded music had stopped. "Danny could have been better than me," Rose continued, his voice growing stronger. "He had a sweeter swing, better hands, and a baseball IQ that would have made him a legend. But life doesn't always work out the way it should, does it? Life throws you curveballs you can't hit, pitches you can't see coming." He paused, looking down at the cap in his hands. "In 1969, Danny saved my life, not dramatically, not in a way that made the papers, but he saved it all the same. And I've carried that with me every single day for 56 years. Martha leaned forward, her heart pounding. She had never heard this story. In all the years she had known Danny, he had never mentioned it. "I'm going to tell you all something," Rose said, looking directly at Carol now. "Your brother was a better man than me, a better man than most of us. And the fact that this room is nearly empty, that's not a reflection on Danny, that's a reflection on the rest of us." He placed the faded cap gently on top of the casket. This was from the '75 World Series. Danny always said it was his favorite season, even though he wasn't playing anymore. He said watching us win it all was almost as good as playing himself. Almost. Rose's voice cracked. "I want him to have it now. Where he's going, maybe they got a better team than the Big Red Machine, but I doubt it." The rain drummed harder against the windows as Pete Rose stood there, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, saying goodbye to a friend the world had forgotten. And Martha Henley realized that the real story, the one that mattered, was just beginning. The atmosphere in the chapel had transformed. What had been a hollow, perfunctory ceremony had suddenly become something else entirely, something raw and real and desperately needed. Pete Rose remained standing beside Danny's casket, his hand resting on the polished wood as if drawing strength from it, or perhaps offering his own. Carol Castellano rose from her seat, her legs unsteady. At 68, she had her brother's dark eyes and the same proud line of the jaw, though grief had hollowed out her features. She approached Rose hesitantly, as if he might disappear if she moved too quickly. "Mr. Rose," she began, her voice hoarse from crying. Danny never told me about 1969, about you saving his life. He never—" Her voice broke, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Rose turned to her, and Martha saw something in his face she hadn't expected. Guilt, deep and old and still festering. "That's because Danny wasn't the kind of man who needed credit for doing right," he said quietly. "He just did it. That was who he was." "But what happened?" Carol asked, the question emerging as almost a plea. "I need to know. I need to understand why my brother's life went the way it did. Why he ended up—" She gestured helplessly at the empty chapel, at the sparse gathering that represented the sum total of mourners for a man who had once had the world at his feet. Rose looked around the room, seeming to take measure of everyone present. His gaze lingered on Martha, who felt suddenly seen, suddenly accountable. Then he nodded as if making a decision. "Maybe we should sit," he said. "This ain't a short story." They moved to the front rows, rearranging themselves around Pete Rose like students gathering around a teacher. The funeral director looked uncertain. This was decidedly not protocol, but something in the moment stopped him from intervening. Even he seemed to sense that something important was happening, something that transcended the usual ceremonies of death. The rain continued its percussion against the windows as Rose settled into a chair, his large frame seeming to deflate slightly, as if the weight of memory was a physical burden. He was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped between his knees, staring at nothing. "Spring training 1969, he finally began. "Bradenton, Florida. I was coming off my first batting title, feeling pretty good about myself. Too good, probably. I had that swagger, you know, that belief that I was untouchable. Danny was in camp trying to make the team. He'd been in the minors for 2 years, tearing up AAA ball. Everyone said he was ready." Martha found herself leaning forward, along with everyone else. Outside, the October afternoon was darkening toward evening, but inside the chapel, time seemed to have stopped. "Danny was different from the rest of us," Rose continued. "Quieter, more thoughtful. While the rest of us were out drinking and chasing girls, Danny was usually reading or writing letters home. The guys gave him grief about it, called him the professor. But it wasn't mean-spirited. There was something about Danny that made you want to be better, you know, just by being around him." One of the elderly men from the back, Martha recognized him now as Tommy Brewster, who had run the corner store on Vine Street for 40 years, spoke up. "I remember that about Danny. Even when he was just a kid playing stickball in the street, he had this way about him, serious but not stuck up. You felt like he was really listening when you talked to him." Rose nodded. "That's exactly it. Danny paid attention. Most of us were too busy thinking about ourselves to notice much else, but Danny saw things." "What did he see in you?" Carol asked softly. Rose's expression darkened. "He saw that I was drowning, literally." The word hung in the air, heavy and shocking. Martha felt Robert's hand tighten around hers. "There was this place we used to go after practice," Rose continued, his voice dropping lower. "A bar on the beach, nothing fancy. Most nights, a bunch of us would head over there, blow off steam. I was drinking too much, way too much, but I was 28 years old and bulletproof, or so I thought. March 15th, 1969. I remember the date because it was the Ides of March, and somebody had made a joke about Caesar. Should have been a warning." He paused, his jaw working as if the words were hard to form. "I was drunk, stupidly, dangerously drunk, and I decided I wanted to go for a swim. It was around midnight, water was rough, but I didn't care. I was Pete Rose, right? Charlie Hustle. Nothing could stop me." "Jesus," Frank muttered, speaking for the first time. Most of the guys laughed, Figured I'd get wet and come back, Rose said. But Danny followed me out, tried to talk me out of it. I told him to get lost, said some things I'm not proud of, called him names, told him he was soft, that he didn't have what it takes to make it in the majors. I was cruel. The alcohol made me cruel. Carol had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming freely now. I went in anyway, Rose continued, and about 30 seconds later I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. The undertow was stronger than I thought. The alcohol had made me clumsy, slow. I went under, came up, went under again. I was going to drown on a beach in Florida because I was too proud and too drunk to listen to common sense. Danny saved you, Martha said, though she already knew the answer. Rose nodded. Danny came in after me. He wasn't a great swimmer. He told me that earlier, told me he was actually afraid of deep water because he'd nearly drowned as a kid in the Ohio River. But he came in anyway, grabbed me, dragged me back to shore while I fought him like an idiot. I was so out of it I thought he was trying to pull me under. He never told anyone, Carol whispered. He made me promise not to tell anyone, Rose corrected. Said if it got out it would hurt both of us. Me because I'd look like a fool, which I was. Him because management would see him as a distraction, someone who couldn't focus on baseball. He said we'd just keep it between us, that what mattered was that we both got out alive. But there's more, isn't there? Martha asked, sensing the deeper layers of the story. Rose's face contorted with pain. 2 weeks later, Danny blew out his knee in an exhibition game. Torn ACL back when that was basically a career ender. The doctors said it was just bad luck, wrong angle, wrong movement, but I always wondered if he hadn't exhausted himself pulling my drunk ass out of the ocean, if his reflexes had been sharper, his legs fresher, maybe he would have moved differently. Maybe he would have avoided that slide. The chapel was absolutely silent except for the rain and the sound of Carol's quiet sobbing. Danny never blamed you, she said through her tears. He never said a word about any of this. I know, Rose said, his voice breaking. That's what made it worse. He just disappeared from camp, went back to Cincinnati, and tried to rehab. But the knee never came back right. He played 2 more years in the minors, but he'd lost a step, lost that edge. By 1971 he was done, 25 years old, and his dream was over. And you went on to become one of the greatest players in baseball history, Frank said, not accusingly, but stating a fact. Rose nodded slowly. I did. Every time I got a hit, every time I made a play, some part of me thought about Danny, about what it cost, about what he gave up for my stupid mistake. I tried to stay in touch with him over the years, sent him World Series tickets, invited him to old-timers games. But Danny, he pulled away, not in a bitter way. He just moved on with his life, became a teacher, worked with kids. He was proud, you know, didn't want to be Pete Rose's friend, wanted to be his own man. He taught history at Western Hills High School for 32 years, Carol said, a note of pride breaking through the grief. He loved those kids, treated every single one of them like they mattered. That sounds exactly like Danny, Rose said, a sad smile touching his lips. Always more interested in other people than himself. Martha felt compelled to speak. I was one of those people, she said, and all eyes turned to her. I was a young teacher, struggling in my first year at Wilson Middle School. Danny was teaching at Western Hills, but he heard through a colleague that I was having trouble with classroom management. He didn't know me from Adam, but he showed up one day after school, knocked on my classroom door, and asked if he could help. Robert squeezed her hand encouragingly as she continued. He came back every week for a month, never asked for anything, never made me feel stupid or inadequate, just shared what he'd learned, listened to my frustrations, reminded me why I'd wanted to teach in the first place. He saved my career. I taught for 38 years because of him. That was Danny, Tommy Brewster added. When my store was struggling in the 80s, couldn't compete with the big chains moving in, Danny organized the neighborhood to shop local. Didn't make a big deal about it, just quietly talked to people, reminded them what community meant. Kept me in business for another 20 years. One by one, the other people in the chapel began to speak. The nurse from the care facility told how Danny had befriended the loneliest residents, spending hours playing cards with them, listening to their stories. One of the elderly men shared how Danny had helped his grandson get into college, writing recommendation letters and helping with applications. Another talked about how Danny had volunteered at a food bank every Saturday for 15 years. As the stories accumulated, a picture emerged of a man who had lived quietly but profoundly, touching lives in ways both large and small, never seeking recognition, never counting the cost. Pete Rose listened to it all, his face a landscape of emotions: grief, pride, guilt, love. When the stories finally subsided, he stood again, moving back to the casket. "I came here today because I owed Danny that much," he said. "But hearing all of you, I realized something. Danny didn't need me to validate his life. His life validated itself. Every person he helped, every student he inspired, every act of kindness he showed. That's his legacy. That's what matters." He looked around at the small group, his expression fierce. "But you know what else? It ain't right that only 11 people showed up today. It ain't right that this man who gave so much got so little in return. So I'm gonna do something about that." "What do you mean?" Carol asked. Rose pulled out his phone, and for the first time since he'd entered, a slight smile appeared on his weathered face. "I mean, I'm gonna tell Danny's story the way it deserves to be told. And I'm gonna make sure Cincinnati remembers the name Danny Castellano." The sky over Cincinnati was the color of old bruises as Pete Rose emerged from the funeral home. The rain had softened to a persistent drizzle, the kind that seeped into your bones rather than washed over you. He stood on the sidewalk of Reading Road, watching the evening traffic splash through puddles, and pulled his phone from his jacket pocket. Behind him, the small group remained in the chapel, not quite ready to leave, held together by the strange gravity of shared stories and delayed recognition. Martha Henley watched through the window as Rose's fingers moved across his phone screen with surprising dexterity for a man his age, typing and scrolling with focused intensity. "What do you think he's doing?" Robert asked, following her gaze. "I think," Martha said slowly, "he's keeping a promise." Inside the chapel, the energy had shifted again. People were no longer preparing to leave. Instead, they had gathered in small clusters, continuing to share memories of Danny Castellano, each story adding another layer to the portrait of a man they were only now beginning to fully understand. Carol sat with Tommy Brewster and the nurse, whose name was Angela Martinez. Angela had worked at Shady Grove Care Facility for 12 years, and in that time she had seen hundreds of residents come and go. But Danny had been different. "He arrived 3 years ago," Angela explained, her accent carrying the musical notes of her Dominican heritage. "Stage 4 lung cancer. The doctors said 6 months, maybe a year with treatment. He lasted 3 years, and you know why? Because he refused to give up on the other residents." What do you mean?" Carol asked, leaning forward. "Mr. Danny, he saw that place for what it really is," Angela continued, her eyes glistening. "A warehouse for people waiting to die. Most residents, they just sit in their rooms watching TV, waiting for visits that don't come often enough. But not Mr. Danny. Even when he was sick, even when the chemo made him weak, he would go room to room, talking to people, listening to their stories. He started a history club, had residents sharing their life stories, recording them, said everyone deserved to be remembered." "I didn't know," Carol whispered, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "He never told me. When I would visit, he'd ask about my life, my kids, everything except himself. I thought he was just being private. I didn't realize he was still being Danny," Frank said, his voice rough. He had been quiet throughout most of the afternoon, but now he seemed to be emerging from his shell of numbness. That was just who he was, Carol. He didn't know how to be any other way. The funeral director, whose name was Martin Springer, approached the small gathering with an uncomfortable expression. "I hate to interrupt," he said, "but we do need to begin closing up. The burial at Spring Grove Cemetery is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10. The family is welcome to return then for the graveside service." "No," Carol said suddenly, with a firmness that surprised everyone, including herself. "No, we're not doing this. We're not sneaking Danny into the ground like he was nobody, not after what we've learned today. Mrs. Hartwell, I understand you're emotional, but the arrangements have been made." "Then unmake them," Carol interrupted. She stood, her small frame somehow commanding the room. "Give me until tomorrow morning." "Can you do that, Mr. Springer? Can you give me until 10 o'clock tomorrow?" The funeral director looked uncertain. What exactly are you planning?" "I'm planning to give my brother the funeral he deserved," Carol said. "The one he never would have asked for himself." Outside, Pete Rose was still on his phone, but now he was talking, his voice carrying in the quiet evening air. Martha moved closer to the door, unabashedly eavesdropping. "Yeah, it's really me. No, I'm serious. Listen, I need you to do something for me. It's important. About an old friend." Rose made call after call, each conversation brief but intense. Martha watched as his body language shifted, becoming more animated, more like the Pete Rose who had played baseball with such ferocious determination. Charlie Hustle, they'd called him, and she could see why. When Pete Rose wanted something, he went after it with everything he had. 20 minutes later, Rose came back inside, his white hair damp and plastered to his skull. Water dripped from his jacket onto the funeral home's tasteful carpet. He looked around at the group, and Martha saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Hope. "Carol," he said, "I need you to trust me. Can you hold off on the burial until Saturday? Give me 2 days." "Saturday?" Carol looked confused. "Mr. Rose, I don't understand." "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to fill this place," Rose said simply. "I'm planning to show Danny that Cincinnati didn't forget him. We just needed to be reminded." "How?" Frank asked, skepticism clear in his voice. "Danny's been gone from baseball for 54 years. Most people don't even remember he existed." Rose's expression hardened. "Then we'll make them remember." He pulled up his phone and showed them the screen. It was Twitter, or X, or whatever they called it now. Rose had posted a photo, one Martha recognized immediately because she'd taken it herself years ago at a neighborhood picnic. It showed Danny at age 65, laughing at something, his face creased with smile lines, wearing a faded Cincinnati Reds t-shirt. The text below read, "This is Danny Castellano. In 1969, he saved my life and lost his dream. He spent the next 50-plus years being the kind of man I could never be, selfless, kind, and devoted to helping others. Today, almost nobody came to his funeral. Let's change that. Let's give Danny the send-off he deserves. Spring Grove Cemetery, Cincinnati, Saturday, 10 a.m. RIP to a real hero. Remember Danny Castellano." "You posted that?" Carol asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 20 minutes ago, Rose confirmed. "It's already got 12,000 likes and climbing. I've been making calls too. Every contact I've got in Cincinnati media, former teammates, coaches, anyone who might remember Danny or who'll listen to his story." "But Mr. Rose," Angela said hesitantly, "what if nobody comes? What if it's just another disappointment?" Rose met her eyes squarely. "Then at least we tried. At least Danny will know somebody fought for him. That's more than he got today." Carol's phone buzzed in her purse, then Frank's, then Tommy's. Within seconds, every phone in the chapel was chiming with notifications. They pulled them out, looking at screens that showed the same thing. Rose's tweet, shared and reshared, rippling across social media like waves from a stone thrown into still water. Martha felt her own phone vibrate and checked it. Her granddaughter, Melissa, had sent a screenshot of the post with a message. "Grandma, isn't this the Mr. Castellano you used to talk about? The teacher who helped you? This is going viral." "It's spreading," Robert said, looking at his own phone in amazement. "People are sharing it everywhere." Rose allowed himself a small smile. "That's the thing about the internet. For all its problems, it's good for one thing, getting the truth out there fast. And the truth about Danny deserves to be heard." Martin Springer cleared his throat. "Mr. Rose, even if this does generate interest, Spring Grove is a public cemetery. We can't control who shows up or how many people. We don't have facilities for a large gathering. The graveside service area seats maybe 50 people." "Then we'll stand," Rose said flatly. "Danny stood for us his whole life. The least we can do is stand for him for an hour." "I'll need to make arrangements," Springer continued, his professional instincts kicking in. "Additional staff, crowd control, possibly even security." "I'll cover it," Rose interrupted. "Whatever it costs. Danny's sister shouldn't have to pay for my idea." "Mr. Rose, I can't let you—" Carol began. "You can and you will," Rose said, his tone brooking no argument. "This ain't about money, Carol. This is about a debt I've been carrying for 56 years. Let me do this. Let me give something back to the man who gave me everything." Carol looked at him for a long moment. This legend standing in a modest funeral home, water dripping from his clothes, fighting for her brother with the same intensity he'd once brought to baseball. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "Saturday at 10. We'll see what happens." Rose's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. "I need to take this. It's Channel 12 News." He stepped away, his voice dropping to a low murmur as he spoke to the reporter on the other end. Martha watched him, this complicated man with his own checkered history, now standing as champion for someone who could no longer speak for himself. "Do you think it'll work?" Robert asked her quietly. Martha thought about the empty chairs, about the weight of anonymity, about all the Danny Castellanos of the world who lived good lives in quiet corners, unknown and unrecognized. She thought about the power of a single voice speaking truth, about the way a stone could create ripples, about the strange mathematics of social media where one post could reach millions in moments. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I hope so. God, how I hope so." By 9 o'clock that evening, Rose's tweet had been shared 50,000 times. News outlets across Ohio were picking up the story. Local radio stations were discussing it. Someone had created a Facebook event page for Saturday's service, and already 300 people had marked themselves as attending. The story was spreading beyond Cincinnati too. Sports blogs were running features about Pete Rose and the man who saved his life. Twitter users were digging up old articles about Danny's brief baseball career, his teaching years, his quiet life of service. The hashtag Remember Danny Castellano was trending in Ohio and starting to spread nationally. By midnight, someone had created a Wikipedia page for Danny Castellano. It was sparse, still being filled in by volunteers, but it was there, a digital memorial being built by strangers who had never met him but were moved by his story. In her home on Madison Road, Martha Henley couldn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table, Robert snoring softly upstairs, and scrolled through the growing cascade of posts and shares and comments about Danny. So many of them from former students, people she didn't know, people Danny had touched in ways she'd never heard about. "Mr. Castellano made me believe I could go to college when nobody else did. First person in my family to graduate. I owe him everything. Danny Castellano taught me history, but more importantly, he taught me to see the dignity in every person. R.I.P. to a real one." My grandfather was in Shady Grove Care Facility with Danny. Said Danny was the only person who treated the residents like human beings instead of problems to be managed. This man deserved better than what he got. On and on they went. Testimonials from people whose lives had intersected with Danny's, each one adding another thread to the tapestry of a life well lived but underappreciated. Martha wiped tears from her eyes and typed her own post, adding her voice to the chorus. Danny Castellano saved my teaching career and, in many ways, my life. He asked for nothing in return. He just wanted to help. The world needs more people like Danny. I'm grateful I knew him, and I'll be at Spring Grove on Saturday to say goodbye properly. Remember Danny Castellano. She hit post and watched her words join the stream, one more small light in a growing constellation of remembrance. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The October night was clear and cold, stars visible for the first time in days. Somewhere across the city, in a modest funeral home on Reading Road, Danny Castellano lay in his casket, unaware of the movement building around his memory, the tide of recognition rising toward him like a long-delayed honor guard. And in a condo in Anderson Township, Pete Rose sat in his kitchen, still making calls, still pushing, still hustling the way he always had, but now for something more important than base hits or championships. He was hustling for redemption. For Danny's, yes, but also for his own. Friday morning broke cold and bright over Cincinnati. The storm had passed, leaving behind the kind of crystalline autumn clarity that made the city look like a postcard. The Ohio River reflected the sky in shades of silver and blue, and the trees on the hills blazed with October color, scarlet and gold and deep burgundy. But inside the offices of Springer and Sons Funeral Home, there was chaos. Martin Springer had been in the funeral business for 32 years. He had handled everything from paupers' burials attended by no one to elaborate services for local celebrities that drew hundreds. He prided himself on his professionalism, his ability to manage any situation with dignity and grace. This situation was testing that pride. Mr. Springer, Spring Grove is online too. His assistant Patricia called from the front desk. They're asking about capacity planning. Again. Tell them I'll call back, Martin said, rubbing his temples. His desk was covered with printouts, diagrams, and hastily scrawled notes. His computer screen showed multiple tabs, news articles, social media feeds, email chains with vendors. No, wait. Transfer them through. He picked up the phone. David, it's Martin. Yes, I saw the latest count. No, I don't know how many people are actually going to show up. The Facebook event page says 1,200 now, but you know how those things are. Have the people who click attending never actually what? You're kidding. Martin listened, his expression growing more incredulous. TV crews? How many? And they want to... Okay, yes, I understand. We'll need barriers then, and security, lots of security. He hung up and looked at Patricia, who stood in the doorway with an expression that matched his own bewilderment. Channel 5, Channel 9, Channel 12, and Fox 19 are all sending crews. CNN is asking for access. CNN, Patricia? For a funeral in Cincinnati. It's Mr. Rose, Patricia said. He was on WLW this morning with Bill Cunningham. The recording's going viral. Have you heard it? Martin pulled up the audio clip on his computer. Pete Rose's gravelly voice filled the office. Look, I know people have opinions about me. I made mistakes, big ones. I'm not standing here pretending to be some kind of saint, but Danny Castellano was. And the fact that he died almost alone, that broke something in me. We live in a world where we celebrate the wrong things, the wrong people. Danny spent 54 years being exactly the kind of man we claim to value. Honest, selfless, dedicated to helping others. And what did he get for it? 11 people at his funeral. That ain't right. That ain't American. So yeah, I'm making noise about it. And if people want to call me a hypocrite or a has-been looking for attention, fine. I've been called worse. But I'm gonna make sure Cincinnati knows what we lost when Danny died. I'm gonna make sure his life meant something. The interview had been played and replayed across social media. News outlets were running with it. The story had legs now, as journalists like to say. Martin closed the laptop and took a deep breath. Call the cemetery back. Tell them we need to plan for at least 2,000 people. Maybe more. 2,000. Patricia's eyes widened. Mr. Springer, I know what it is, Martin interrupted. But look at this. He gestured to his computer screen, where the Remember Danny Castellano hashtag showed a constantly refreshing stream of posts. This isn't just Cincinnati anymore, this is national. People are flying in from other states, former students, people Danny helped, baseball fans who never even met him but are moved by the story. We need to be ready. His phone rang again. It was Carol Hartwell. Mr. Springer? Carol's voice was shaky, overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Reporters want interviews. People are asking about Danny's life, his teaching, his baseball career. I'm not prepared for this. Mrs. Hartwell, I understand this is overwhelming, Martin said, switching into his professional, calming voice. But let me help you manage it. First, you don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to. Second, Mr. Rose has offered to handle media coordination. He has experience with this kind of attention. But it feels wrong, Carol said, and Martin could hear tears in her voice. Danny lived his whole life avoiding the spotlight. He never wanted attention. And now all of this, would he have wanted it? Martin considered the question carefully. Maybe not. But perhaps what Danny wanted and what he deserved are two different things. Your brother spent his life giving to others. Maybe it's time others gave back to him. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Carol spoke, her voice stronger. Okay, tell me what I need to do. By Friday afternoon, Pete Rose had set up an impromptu command center in a corner booth at Zip's Cafe, a legendary Cincinnati diner on Mount Lookout Square where he'd been eating breakfast for 40 years. The owner, Jerry Zipkin, had known Rose since his playing days and was only too happy to provide space and endless coffee. Rose sat surrounded by papers, laptops, and phones, his own and two others he'd borrowed. Across from him sat Mitch Harrison, a former Reds publicist who had handled media relations during the Big Red Machine era and whom Rose had coaxed out of retirement for this. Okay, let's go through the list, Mitch said, his reading glasses perched on his nose. USA Today wants a phone interview. ESPN is asking about filming a segment. The Cincinnati Enquirer wants to run a full feature on Danny's life. They're interviewing former students today, and we've got requests from 3 different publishers about book rights. Book rights? Rose looked up, surprised. Already? It's a good story, Pete, Mitch said. Fallen baseball prospect sacrifices career to save future Hall of Famer, lives quiet life of service, dies alone, then gets discovered posthumously. It's got everything, sports, redemption, social commentary about how we value people. Of course, publishers are interested. Rose shook his head. Any money from that goes to Carol and to Danny's favorite charities. I'm not profiting off this. Noted, Mitch said, making a note. What about your own interviews? You're being asked everywhere. 60 Minutes called. I'll do local stuff, Rose decided. This is Cincinnati's story, Danny's story. I'm not turning it into the Pete Rose show. Set up something with Channel 12. They've been fair to me over the years. Maybe one radio spot. That's it. The cafe door opened, and Martha Henley walked in, accompanied by Robert and 3 other people Rose didn't recognize. She approached the booth tentatively. Mr. Rose, I'm Martha Henley. We met yesterday at the funeral home. I remember, Rose said, standing. The teacher. You spoke about how Danny helped you. Yes. These are some of Danny's other former colleagues. Martha gestured to the people with her. We'd like to help. We've been making calls, reaching out to former students, gathering stories and photos. We thought maybe for the service tomorrow we could create some kind of display, so people who didn't know Danny could understand who he was. Rose looked at Mitch, who nodded. That's a great idea, Rose said. Mitch, can we coordinate with the cemetery on setting up a display area? Consider it done, Mitch replied, already making notes. There's something else, Martha continued. She pulled out a worn notebook from her bag. I found this in Danny's things. Carol gave me permission to look through some boxes from his apartment. It's a journal he kept during his baseball years. Rose took the notebook carefully, as if it were made of glass. The cover was faded leather, cracked with age. He opened it to a random page and saw Danny's handwriting, neat and precise. May 8th, 1967. Got 2 hits today against Houston. Coach says I'm ready for the majors. Can't believe this is really happening. Called Mom, she cried. Dad would have been so proud. Rose's throat tightened. He flipped to another page. March 16th, 1969. Something happened last night that I can't talk about. Made a choice. Hope it was the right one. Pete doesn't remember much, probably better that way. Some things you just do because they're right, not because you expect anything back. March 30th, 1969, knee surgery tomorrow. Doctor says it's bad. Not sure what happens next. Scared, but trying to keep faith. At least Pete's okay. That matters more than people know. Rose closed the notebook, unable to continue. He handed it back to Martha with trembling hands. Thank you for showing me this. Does Carol know? She's reading it now, Martha said softly. There are 50 years of entries in there. His thoughts, his struggles, his joys. It's a remarkable document. We thought maybe some excerpts could be shared tomorrow to let Danny speak in his own words. Yes, Rose managed. That's perfect. As Martha and her group left to continue their preparations, Rose sat back down, feeling the weight of everything pressing on him. Mitch watched him with the careful attention of someone who had known him for decades. You okay, Pete? I don't know, Rose admitted. This whole thing, it's gotten bigger than I expected. What if we screw it up? What if we turn Danny's funeral into a circus? Or, Mitch countered gently, what if you're giving a good man the recognition he earned? What if you're showing people that the quiet heroes matter just as much as the famous ones? Rose nodded slowly. I just keep thinking about that notebook. Danny knew. He knew what that night in Florida cost him. And he never said a word. Never blamed me. How do you live with that kind of grace? I don't know, Mitch said. But maybe that's what tomorrow is about. Maybe it's about showing that we recognize it, even if we can't replicate it. Across town, at Western Hills High School, Principal Jennifer Moss was coordinating something unprecedented. Danny Castellano had retired from teaching in 2003, 22 years ago. But his impact on the school remained. The history department still used some of his lesson plans. His approach to teaching, emphasizing primary sources, critical thinking, and the human stories behind historical events, had become the model for the entire department. When the news broke about Danny's story, Jennifer had been flooded with calls from former students wanting to do something to honor him. By Friday afternoon, they had a plan. We're chartering 3 buses, Jennifer explained to the superintendent on a conference call. Current students, faculty, and alumni who want to attend the funeral, probably 150 people total. The students want to wear their school colors and carry signs thanking Mr. Castellano for his service. That's quite a gesture, the superintendent said. But are we prepared for the logistics? This is getting a lot of media attention. Sir, with respect, Danny Castellano gave 32 years to this school and to Cincinnati Public Schools. He shaped literally thousands of young lives. If we can't show up for him now, what does that say about us? There was a pause. You're right. Coordinate with the District Office on Transportation and Liability Waivers. Let's do this right. At Shady Grove Care Facility, Angela Martinez was facing a different challenge. The residents wanted to attend the funeral. Not just a few of them, but nearly all of them who were physically able. They wanted to say goodbye to the man who had made their final years less lonely. "It's logistically complicated," the facility director said, reviewing Angela's proposal. "We're talking about transporting 23 residents, many with mobility issues, medical equipment, medications. The insurance liability alone—" "Mr. Danny would have figured it out," Angela interrupted. "He always found a way to make things happen for the residents. They need this. They need to show that he mattered to them." The director sighed, but Angela could see she was wavering. "If we do this, we need nurses, equipment, probably 2 transport vans, and we can't stay long. Many of these residents can't handle extended trips." "We'll make it work," Angela said firmly. "Mr. Danny deserves an honor guard of the people he loved." By Friday evening, the pieces were falling into place. Spring Grove Cemetery had agreed to set up a large outdoor area near Danny's burial plot. The Cincinnati Police Department had assigned officers for crowd control. Local businesses were donating chairs, tents, and a sound system. Channel 12 was preparing a special segment about Danny's life to air Saturday morning. And through it all, the social media momentum continued building. The hashtag had been used over 200,000 times. News outlets from New York to Los Angeles were covering the story. It had become something larger than a funeral. It had become a cultural moment, a conversation about how society values quiet service over loud accomplishment. In her home that evening, Carol Hartwell sat surrounded by 40 years of her brother's life. Photo albums, letters, report cards from students, commendations from the school district, and that journal, which she couldn't stop reading. Frank found her in Danny's old room, tears streaming down her face as she read an entry from 1987. "Carol's kids are growing up so fast. Got to spend time with them today. They call me Uncle Danny, and it makes me feel like I have a family of my own. Never had children of my own, but these kids, they're close enough. I'm a lucky man." "I didn't know," Carol sobbed. "I didn't know how much he loved my children. I didn't know how much he gave up. Why didn't he tell me?" Frank sat beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Because that wasn't Danny. He didn't keep score. He just lived. And now all these people, strangers mostly, are honoring him. Where were they when he was alive and lonely? Maybe they didn't know," Frank said gently. "Maybe that's what Pete Rose is really doing. He's not just honoring Danny. He's showing people that the Danny Castellanos of the world exist, and they matter. Maybe it'll make people pay more attention to the quiet heroes in their own lives." Carol wiped her eyes and looked at the boxes of memories surrounding them. "Do you think Danny would be embarrassed by all this attention?" Frank considered. "Probably. But you know what? For once, what Danny wants doesn't matter as much as what he deserves. And he deserves this, Carol. He deserves every bit of it." That night, Pete Rose couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow, thinking about Danny, thinking about the long arc of a life and how it gets measured in the end. He thought about his own legacy, the hits, the records, the banishment from baseball, the gambling scandal that had defined his later years, the way his accomplishments were always viewed through the lens of his mistakes. And then he thought about Danny, who had no scandals, no controversies, just a lifetime of quiet goodness that had gone unrecognized until after his death. "I got it backwards," Rose said aloud to the empty room. "I thought the hits mattered most, the championships, the records. But Danny had the right idea all along. It's not about what you accomplish, it's about who you help, who you lift up, who you save." He got out of bed and walked to his window. Cincinnati spread out below him, lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, preparations were being made, people were writing speeches, students were making signs, elderly residents were laying out their best clothes for tomorrow's trip, all for a man who had asked for nothing and given everything. "I'll get it right tomorrow, Danny." Rose whispered to the night. "I promise you that. I'll get it right." Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, one of those perfect October days that Cincinnati specialized in. The sky was an impossible blue, and the autumn leaves in Spring Grove Cemetery glowed like stained glass in the early light. The cemetery, established in 1845, was one of the oldest and most beautiful in America, with its rolling hills, elaborate monuments, and ancient trees that had witnessed nearly 2 centuries of goodbyes. But nothing in its long history had prepared it for today. Martha Henley arrived at 8:30, a full 90 minutes before the scheduled service, and already the cemetery was transforming. Workers were setting up rows of chairs, far more than originally planned. A sound system was being tested. News vans lined the access road, satellite dishes pointing skyward, and people were arriving, a steady stream of them flooding through the gates. "My God," Robert breathed, taking in the scene. "Look at them all." They parked and walked toward the designated area, and with each step the scale of what was happening became clearer. This wasn't just a funeral anymore. This was a phenomenon. Buses were pulling up, disgorging passengers. Martha recognized the Western Hills High School colors, current students in their school hoodies, alumni ranging from young adults to people in their 70s, all converging on this spot. The students carried handmade signs. "Thank you, Mr. Castellano, history's greatest teacher. You made us believe." A van from Shady Grove Care Facility arrived, and Martha watched as Angela Martinez and other nurses carefully helped residents into wheelchairs. The elderly men and women were dressed in their finest, suits and dresses that probably hadn't been worn in years. One old man clutched a framed photo of himself with Danny, taken at some care facility event. People kept coming. Former students, now middle-aged with their own children in tow, neighbors from Danny's old neighborhood on Vine Street, teachers from schools across the district, complete strangers who had been moved by the story and wanted to pay respects to a man they'd never met. By 9:15, the chairs were full. People stood in clusters around the perimeter, and still they came. Cemetery staff scrambled to expand the area, moving back the barriers, trying to accommodate the growing crowd. Carol Hartwell arrived at 9:30, and when she saw the gathering, she stopped walking. Frank had to steady her. "Danny," she whispered, "look what they're doing for you." The cemetery had set up a memory table with photos from Danny's life. Martha and her committee had worked until midnight assembling it. Danny as a young ball player, his face bright with dreams. Danny in his classroom, surrounded by attentive students. Danny at neighborhood gatherings, always on the periphery of group photos, but always present. Danny in his final years, his face lined, but his eyes still kind. And there were stories printed on poster boards, testimonials from the hundreds of people whose lives he had touched. Mr. Castellano stayed after school 3 days a week for a semester to tutor me in history. I was failing, ready to drop out. He never gave up on me. I graduated, went to college, and now I'm a teacher myself. I try every day to be the teacher he was. Michael Torres, class of 1989. Danny Castellano delivered groceries to my grandmother for 5 years when she was too old to shop for herself. Never asked for money, never wanted recognition. Just did it because it needed doing. Sarah Chen, I was homeless in 2001, sleeping in my car. Mr. Castellano found me in the school parking lot one morning. He didn't call the police or tell me to leave. He brought me breakfast, helped me find shelter, connected me with social services, and checked on me every week until I got back on my feet. He saved my life. Robert Bobby Washington. On and on they went, each one a thread in the larger tapestry of a life lived in service to others. At 9:45, a black SUV pulled up and Pete Rose emerged. He wore the same black suit from Thursday, but today he also wore something else, his old Cincinnati Reds jacket, the red and white one from his playing days. It was a bold choice, perhaps even controversial, But as he walked through the crowd, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. People applauded. Some called his name. He waved and nodded, but kept moving toward the front, where Carol waited. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, taking her hands, "I hope this is okay. I hope it's not too much." Carol looked out at the sea of people, at least 3,000 now, probably more, and tears streamed down her face. "It's perfect," she managed. Thank you. Thank you for seeing my brother." The service was scheduled to begin at 10, but Martin Springer approached Pete Rose with an update. "Mr. Rose, we have a problem. There are over 4,000 people here, and more are still arriving. We've run out of room. People are standing 5 deep behind the seating area. Some are on the hillsides. The Cincinnati police are asking if we want to move this to a larger venue." Rose looked around, taking in the massive gathering. Then he shook his head. "No, this is where Danny belongs. In Spring Grove, where Cincinnati buries its own. If people want to stand, let them stand. Danny stood for them his whole life." At precisely 10 o'clock, a hush fell over the crowd. The sound system crackled to life, and Martin Springer stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today to honor the life of Daniel Joseph Castellano. Your presence here is a testament to the impact one life can have when lived with purpose, kindness, and dedication to others." He introduced Carol, who approached the microphone with trembling legs. She looked out at the thousands of faces, and for a moment she couldn't speak. Then she found her voice. "My brother Danny was not a famous man," she began, her words carrying across the cemetery through the sound system. "He never wanted to be famous. He just wanted to be useful. He wanted to matter. And looking at all of you here today, I finally understand he did matter more than I ever knew." She talked about growing up with Danny in Cincinnati, about his love of baseball, about the dreams he'd had as a young man. She talked about the phone call in 1969, telling her about his injury and how something in Danny had changed after that. Not bitterly, but fundamentally, as if he'd decided that if he couldn't live his dream, he'd spend his life helping others reach theirs. "He never complained," Carol said, "never expressed regret. He just moved forward day by day, student by student, person by person, making the world a little bit better in small ways that he thought no one noticed. But you noticed. You're here because you noticed, and that means everything." When Carol finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Martha Henley spoke next, sharing her story about how Danny had saved her teaching career. Then came Angela Martinez, representing the Shady Grove residents, several of whom were crying openly in their wheelchairs. Then Tommy Brewster, the old grocer, talking about how Danny had saved his business. But it was when Jennifer Moss, the Western Hills principal, invited former students to share brief memories that the real power of Danny's legacy became clear. One by one, people approached the microphone. A doctor who said Danny had inspired him to go into medicine. A social worker who credited Danny with teaching her about compassion. A police officer who said Danny's history class had shown him how to see multiple perspectives. A mother who said Danny had been the only teacher who believed her son, who had severe dyslexia, could succeed. The testimonials went on for nearly an hour, each one building on the last, creating a portrait of sustained, patient, transformative kindness. Finally, Pete Rose approached the microphone. The crowd, which had been murmuring between speakers, fell completely silent. Rose stood there for a long moment, looking at Danny's casket, draped in an American flag and topped with a simple spray of white roses. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I've given a lot of speeches in my life," he began. "Most of them about baseball, about hitting, about winning, about records and championships, and I'm not going to lie, I was proud of those things. I am proud of those things. But standing here today, looking at what Danny Castellano built with his life, I realized something. I got 3,000 hits in my career. Danny got about 3,000 people whose lives he changed for the better, and I'm not sure which accomplishment matters more in the end." He paused, looking out at the massive crowd. "A lot of you know my story, know about my mistakes, my banishment from baseball, the gambling scandal. I made bad choices, hurt people I loved, damaged my own legacy. And I've spent a lot of years living with that, trying to understand why I did what I did. But here's what I've realized this week. Danny and I started at the same place. Two kids from Cincinnati who loved baseball and dreamed of making it to the majors. We both got our shot, but then our paths diverged. I got fame and records and a spot in history. Danny got injury and obscurity and a quiet life. I spent decades trying to preserve my legacy. Danny spent decades not caring about legacy at all. He just cared about people." Rose's voice broke. "And you know what? He won. Danny won. Because look at this. Look at all of you. You're not here because of what Danny achieved. You're here because of who he was, and in the end, that's all that really matters." He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket. Danny kept a journal. His sister gave me permission to share something he wrote in 1975, the year we won the World Series. He wrote, "Watched Pete and the boys win it all tonight, so proud of them. Sometimes I wonder what my career could have been, but then I think about my students, about the lives I get to touch every day, and I realize I already won my World Series. It just looks different than I expected." Rose folded the paper carefully and put it back in his pocket. "Danny saved my life in 1969. He gave up his dream so I could keep pursuing mine, and I never got to thank him properly. Never got to tell him what it meant. So I'm telling all of you instead. Danny Castellano was the best man I ever knew. And if I could trade every hit, every record, every accolade I ever received to be half the man he was, I'd do it in a heartbeat." He looked at the casket one more time. "Thank you, Danny, for saving me, for showing me what really matters, for being the hero I could never be. Rest easy, my friend. You earned it." Adi. As Pete Rose stepped away from the microphone, something spontaneous happened. One person in the crowd began to clap, then another, then 10, then 100, then thousands. The applause rolled across Spring Grove Cemetery like thunder, building and building until the entire massive gathering was on its feet, applauding Danny Castellano. A standing ovation for a man who had lived his life sitting with the lonely, kneeling beside the struggling, standing up for the forgotten. The applause went on for 5 minutes, maybe longer. People wept openly, clutching each other, united in this moment of collective recognition. The students from Western Hills High School raised their signs high. The Shady Grove residents clapped with trembling hands. Former students who are now grandparents themselves applauded through tears. And in the midst of it all, Carol Hartwell broke down completely, held up by Frank and Pete Rose, sobbing not with grief, but with gratitude that her brother's life had been seen, truly seen, by so many. When the applause finally subsided, a minister said a brief prayer, and then it was time for the burial. The cemetery staff lowered Danny's casket into the ground as a soloist sang "Amazing Grace," her voice pure and clear in the October air. People filed past, dropping flowers onto the casket, saying their private goodbyes. The line took nearly 2 hours to complete. By the time the last person had passed, the grave was filled with thousands of flowers, roses and carnations and lilies and simple wildflowers picked from nearby fields. As the crowd began to disperse, Martha noticed something remarkable. People weren't just leaving, they were exchanging contact information, forming connections, sharing their own stories. The Western Hills students were talking to the Shady Grove residents, building unexpected bridges across generations. Former students were introducing themselves to each other, discovering shared experiences and forming new friendships. Danny's funeral had become something more than a goodbye. It had become a community, united by their connection to a man who had understood that the point of life was connection itself. Pete Rose was one of the last to leave. He stood by the grave long after the crowds had thinned, just him and the flowers and the fresh earth. Martha watched from a distance, giving him space, but close enough to see the tears on his weathered face. Finally, he placed his hand on the temporary marker that bore Danny's name. "I kept my promise," he said quietly. "I made sure they knew. I made sure you mattered." He turned to leave and found Martha waiting. They walked together toward the parking area in comfortable silence. "Do you think he knew?" Rose asked finally. "Do you think Danny understood how many lives he'd changed?" Martha considered the question carefully. "I think Danny wasn't counting. I think that was the whole point. He just lived his life trying to help people. One person at a time, never adding up the total. Maybe that's what made him so effective. He wasn't doing it for recognition or to build a legacy. He was doing it because it was right." Rose nodded slowly. "That's harder than it sounds. Living without counting." "Yes," Martha agreed, "it is. But maybe that's what we learned today. Maybe we learned that the quiet heroes are the real heroes, and maybe some of us will try a little harder to live that way." They reached Rose's SUV. He climbed in but didn't start the engine immediately. Through the open window, he looked back toward Danny's grave, now covered in a blanket of flowers. "You know what the crazy thing is?" he said. "I got inducted into 14 halls of fame in my career, had my number retired, got standing ovations at ballparks all over the country. But I never felt about any of those moments the way I felt about today, about getting this ovation for Danny. Because this one mattered more," Martha said simply. "Yeah," Rose agreed, "this one mattered more." He drove away and Martha stood there for a moment, watching him go. Then she turned back toward the cemetery, where Robert was waiting by their car. The sun was high now, warming the October afternoon. Workers were beginning to fill in Danny's grave, and Martha knew that in a few weeks a proper headstone would be placed there. Carol had already ordered it, simple granite with Danny's name, his dates, and a single line beneath. He helped. It was perfect. As Martha and Robert drove home through the streets of Cincinnati, past neighborhoods Danny had walked, schools where he'd taught, places where he'd lived his quiet, powerful life, she thought about legacy and memory and the strange ways that lives intersect and influence each other. Danny Castellano had saved Pete Rose's life in 1969. Pete Rose had saved Danny's memory in 2025. And in between those two moments stretched 56 years of service, of kindness, of patient, persistent goodness that had changed thousands of lives in ways both large and small. The story would continue to spread. The news coverage would reach millions. Books would be written. Danny's name would be remembered, at least for a while. But Martha knew that the real impact wasn't in the headlines or the hashtags. It was in the doctor who treated his patients with compassion because Danny had shown him how. In the teacher who stayed after school to help struggling students because Danny had done the same for her. In the hundreds of small kindnesses that would ripple forward through time, person to person, generation to generation, all originating from a man who had never sought credit but who had changed the world anyway. That evening, as the sun set over Cincinnati, painting the October sky in shades of amber and rose, Pete Rose sat in his home and wrote a letter. Not an email or a text, but an actual letter written by hand on paper, the way Danny used to write them. It was addressed to Carol Hartwell, but it was really for Danny. "Dear Carol, thank you for letting me honor your brother. Thank you for sharing his story, his journal, his life with all of us. I know today was overwhelming, maybe even too much. But I hope you know it came from a place of love and respect and a desperate need to make things right. I spent my career chasing records and glory, thinking that was what mattered. Danny spent his life just trying to help people, not caring if anyone noticed. And in the end, he taught me the greatest lesson I ever learned, that the score that matters isn't the one on the board. It's the one in the hearts of the people whose lives you touch. I'm not a religious man, but if there's a heaven, I hope Danny's there now, finally getting his turn at bat in the major leagues. And I hope somewhere, somehow, he knows that he hit the greatest home run of all. He showed us how to live a life that matters. Thank you for sharing him with us, and thank you for letting me say goodbye properly. With deepest respect and gratitude, Pete Rose. He sealed the letter and set it aside to mail in the morning. Then he sat in his chair, looking at the photo of Danny he'd pulled from the memory table at the cemetery. Young Danny in his baseball uniform, eyes bright with dreams, not yet knowing how those dreams would transform into something even more valuable. "You won, Danny," Pete whispered to the photo. "You won it all." And somewhere, in the growing darkness of that October evening, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, Danny Castellano was smiling.